Alrighty, folks, if you've been on my channel for any length of time, you know that we keep reporting on the wasteland of San Francisco. We've had the largest hotel go back to the bank. We've had the largest retail establishment go back to the bank. We've had Whole Foods and Nordstrom's and just the movie theater and just death by a thousand cuts. And San Francisco is clearly dying. I would like to talk to Jonathan Twomley, who has experience living in and around New York in the 80s, because I want to be clear. I believe San Francisco will be back. When? Good question. When do we hit bottom? Also a good question. I thought we'd talk to Jonathan about New York and also talk about maybe other parts of the country, because I think San Francisco is a wasteland and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I think it'll be back. So, Jonathan, I don't know if you're seeing headlines about what's going on in San Francisco. Maybe you're having flashbacks to New York in the 80s. But what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah, so I mean, I want to ask you a question though. So when you sort of define wasteland, I mean, I'm assuming it's not like the whole city, not, but is it concentrated in certain areas like the business
It
district?
is unfortunately growing.
Yeah,
The footprint of encampments and whatnot. They're dominating Market Street, which is the financial district, which is wild to think about.
yeah,
The city has recently tried to clean up a couple of areas, but it's only because they've looked so bad.
yeah,
But yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad in most places. It's grown for sure.
yeah. I mean, so so there are some differences between that situation in New York in the '80s, but so
Okay.
let me talk a little bit about it. So I mean, definitely just to kind of paint the picture, I remember as a teenager, you know, grew up in the suburbs outside New York City, and we would go into the city, when we were in high school to go hang out and stuff. And there were definitely, there were sort of areas that were good that we would go hang out in, and there were areas you wanted to avoid. The subways were really kind of sketchy and scary, but you had to take them. And there was the squeegee man, right? And like if you drove into the city, every time you stopped at a traffic light, in some places you'd have these, guys running up and like forcibly cleaning your windshield and demanding money, right? And Rudy Giuliani actually ran like on the platform of getting rid of the squeegee man, right?
Mm.
And sort of won on that basis. So New York in the late '80s was it had gone through, in the '70s is really the time where New York sort of collapsed. Like the city went bankrupt. There's the famous, the city asked the feds for a bailout. President Ford said no. There's that famous headline of, the Post or something like, Ford to city, drop dead. I don't know if you've
Mm.
seen that
I
famous
haven't, but
headline.
okay. I'll look it
And
up.
so in the '80s, the city was still kind of reeling from this. And then there was like a real estate crash in the '80s
Oh,
as
of
well.
course.
There was
Yeah.
a big boom actually in I think probably related to like the tax cuts under Reagan. People started putting that money into real estate, and so there was a big real estate boom in New York City, and then a crash in the late '80s, and so the city was like reeling from all this stuff, right? But one thing that is different between now and so the city then and San Francisco now is that all that time people were still going to the city to work, right? I mean, there was a phenomenon of a lot of corporate offices relocating to the suburbs, so that was sort of an issue, and people were concerned about it. But it wasn't, from what I recall, like office buildings emptying out.
Mm.
There was still a really substantial number of people who were commuting into the city, spending the day in the city, eating lunch, eating dinner, going out, all that kind of stuff, then going home to the suburbs. But
Okay.
there definitely was this like, there was kind of a steady drumbeat of corporate offices moving from Manhattan to Stamford, Connecticut, for instance. That was like a big destination for a lot of, or to Westchester outside the city, Westchester County, New York. There's places like that in New Jersey, right? So there was this fear of like, we got the exodus happening. Then, New York, I think, got lucky in the sense that so a couple of things happened. You know, Giuliani came in as mayor, and with the idea that like, hey, we could turn it around. Like people had given up. They were like,
Yeah.
we can't turn it around. This is impossible. And Giuliani was like, why? Why can't we turn it around? Like, who said
Yeah.
we can't turn it around? Let's use our
Yeah.
imagination.
Where's that written in the law that we can't turn it around? Come on,
Yeah,
guys.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he came in with that attitude, followed by Mike Bloomberg, and we had pretty good mayors for some time, and not without issues, but I mean, generally speaking,
Yeah.
pretty good.
You have to have that attitude. I mean, you have to have an attitude of we're going to get through this. I know it's going to be hard, but
Yeah.
you got to believe kind of thing. And I think that's going to, I again think San Francisco will come back. I do think you need a change of leadership. You can't have the same leaders that are there today that made this, made the bed or made the soup or whatever. You got to throw them out, get some new ones. But it's going to take that kind of attitude of, yeah, we can do it. It's going to be hard, but let's go.
And I think then the other thing that New York benefited from was this kind of like worldwide phenomenon of people wanting to move back to cities, right?
Ah, okay.
So that also, so there's kind of the two things happening at once, but it really accelerated under Giuliani and Bloomberg because the city just became a much better place to move to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
yeah,
you had that happening. So we didn't have like this office crisis, like a big donut in the middle of the city that nobody wanted to go to. So San Francisco has, in some ways, maybe a bigger challenge than New York. However, I agree with you. There are certain very attractive things about San Francisco that in the long run people will want to be there for, right? And so it's really just a matter of kind of converting that real estate, from office to residential, to other uses. Plus, I think probably at some point the people in San Francisco will say enough is enough. We need a change of.
You would hope so.
We need a new kind of.
I don't care who comes in, but it's got to be someone new. Let's just start over.
Yeah, exactly. We just need like a new perspective on how to run the city, and I think that will help San Francisco. So, but New York was a long process. It wasn't like a 5-year thing.
No, decades.
It took a couple of, from the 70s to the 90s. That was a long process of New York kind of bottoming out and then really coming back. And so,
I don't know. Have you read one of the books that I read decades ago was Donald Trump's original book, Art of the Deal, I think it was called. And he talked about the Commodore Hotel that he bought, like his first big footprint in Manhattan, if memory serves. And again, what I want people to realize is I think there will be a Donald Trump-like figure who comes in at the bottom and makes a splashy headline and frankly becomes a billionaire because of it. It will offer that kind of money. There will be some time in the future. I don't know if it's later this year, next year, or shoot the year after. But somebody will come in and put their foot down and say, well, I'm going to take this asset that's prime location in a prime city, and we're just going to do it. So,
I mean,
somebody's going to make $1 billion.
We were joking offline about the Zuck Musk cage match. But I mean, you can see somebody like that also saying like, hey, I'm going to this enough is enough. And this is like super cheap. Like, I got enough money that I can afford
wait it out
and wait it out. Right. And I'm just going to come in and because these assets are just too cheap to turn down. And I think that you're going to see that kind of thing where people have a long-term vision, and they're prepared to wait it out, right? And they also want to. I think some of these guys eventually start thinking about what their legacy is going to be, right? Like, do they want to be considered as an asshole for for like all of history, or do they want to start doing something?
The name.
Do they want to be Andrew Carnegie or do they want to be Jay Gould, right?
Yeah, exactly. Jay Gould or Andrew Carnegie. If you don't know who they are, look them up. Yep.
Yeah. And so I think all these guys come to this point at some point in their lives and they just think making more money just isn't going to do anything for them.
Yeah.
Right? And
it's funny you bring that up because I don't know if you know this, you may, but Zuckerberg made a big commitment to San Francisco with the hospital.
Yeah.
I think he funded, and there might have been the sales Benioff. I think it was Benioff. I stand correct. And maybe it's both of them. I don't know. Anyways, you're right. I think there are some billionaires out there. It's like, all right, enough's enough. I'm going to buy 7 total assets that are empty and destroyed for 30 cents on the dollar. I'll move my companies there.
Yeah.
I'll bring my partners there, and we're just going to suck it up. I'll hire security or whatever I got to do to make this footprint better, and then it'll just grow from there. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there'll be some billionaire or maybe a collection of them that goes, enough's enough. San Francisco will be back. I fully believe that. It'll be back and flying high in no time. But there's a lot of pain ahead, and I think you're right. It will take somebody with chutzpah and a big checkbook to say enough's enough. I think that's good logic.
Absolutely. But I think we also wanted to talk about some of the sort of surprising.
Yeah, go for it.
Right. Yeah. So now San Francisco has gotten a lot of attention, kind of sucked a lot of the media attention up. and New York, too, but New York seems to pretty much be, it's not back to
Back. Dude,
normal
record high
completely.
rents. It's damn near close to back.
Oh yeah, and the hotels are full, right? I mean, you can't like walk through Manhattan right now without I mean, it's
It's
nuts, right?
back. It's just
It is
back.
totally back. The only thing that's not back is office, right? But that's I think going to slowly start to come back because now, I mean, I don't mean to get sidetracked, but companies are starting to put a lot of pressure on people to go back to the office, right?
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of people are starting to realize the limitations of work from home. And here's an interesting thing, again, another tangent, but so this whole like flexible office thing, we need less office space because people are only here 3 days a week. The problem is they're all there the same 3 days of the week, right? Everybody's there Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yeah,
Thursday. So they need
exactly.
just as much office space as they did before, right? Because people are all there at the same time. They're not
Exactly.
spreading it out over the week, right?
Yeah, it's
So
not Monday through Wednesday and Wednesday through
yeah,
Friday kind of
they're not
shifts.
splitting up the
Yeah.
workforce, right? Because they want people to be there for meetings at the same time. So I think we'll see a lot of office coming back. Maybe not to the same level, but
Yeah,
certainly
probably
not
not.
to
Yeah.
the depths. But anyway, but looking at now, while this has been going on, while all of the attention has gotten sucked up by the big coastal
Nothing.
cities and the issues
Mhm.
that they're facing, people have ignored cities like Houston, like Kansas City, like and a number of other cities in the Midwest where what unfortunately they're learning the hard lesson that you know back in the 70s when they essentially converted their downtowns into offices and parking lots and nothing else, when there's no reason for people to want to live in the city. Now that the office is gone, there's nothing there. There's nothing left. And those cities are going to, and there's nothing really, and I don't mean to offend anybody who lives there. I'm sure they're great places to live, but I'm just talking about like the downtown cores,
Yeah.
right?
Just
When
office, 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 office. Yeah.
office, buildings that all look the same. When you're in a hotel room and you look out your window, you can't tell what city you're in. There's nothing distinctive about these places, right? They're just boxes,
Hmm.
of offices and surrounded by parking lots. And there's no reason to be there if no one's making you go, right?
Hmm.
And so those cities are actually going to be, I was reading this morning, going to have a much tougher time than a place like San Francisco over the long run. If unless they can figure out how to reconvert those downtown cores into places that people want to live, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and so that's going to be a difficult process for a
Yeah.
lot of cities to, because they were not really that pleasant. I'm talking about the
Yeah.
downtown courts again. They were not that pleasant to be in.
Yeah. You commute in, do your thing, you commute home. There's no reason to still like ghost towns at the end, at 7 o'clock.
End of the day. Yeah, right. And walking down the street trying to, you just see nobody around at all, right? And so without having more of a mixed use in these downtowns where people can live and work and walk places and go to restaurants and bars and have fun,
Mhm.
they're going to be dead. And that's
Yeah.
really, so a lot of those cities are going to be in really bad shape because their tax base is going to, you get into this vicious
Yeah.
cycle, which you saw, you know, it's funny, people who are not as old as you and and you're on the West Coast, you may not have seen this, but I remember going to like the South sometimes back in like the early 90s. And you'd go to places like, you know, Raleigh, Durham, or Charlotte, or whatever, and they were like dead, dead, dead downtown. There was
Mhm.
nothing going on. Like nobody was there, just parking lots and like you know. Now with all this population growth and people wanting to live in cities, a lot of those cities have like done intelligent things, like put really attractive like
Parks and
sports
all that.
stadiums
Yeah.
downstairs, parks, like all kinds of things to make it like places that people want to be. The
Yeah.
Midwestern cities didn't. A lot of them didn't do that, right?
Interesting.
So they're going to have to reinvent themselves. Now, one good example of this is Columbus, Ohio, right? Where
Okay.
Columbus, Ohio has actually done a really good job while no one was really paying attention to
Mhm.
make the downtown someplace that people wanted to be. And as a result, Columbus, even though the population of Ohio is flatlining or shrinking, the population of Columbus continues to increase because people want to be there, right? And
Yeah.
so these other cities, if they don't get really proactive about, you know, trying to reinvent themselves and doing it fast, they're going to be in for probably a worse time than San Francisco
Mm.
in over the next 30 years. So
This is going to be a fun topic to watch. We're going to be talking about some things like this every Thursday morning. Jonathan, where can somebody find you if they wanted to reach out or interact with you?
Yeah, so please come by my Facebook group at apartmentinvestorsclub.com. You can also go to my website, apartmentinvestorsclub.com, and get the free download there about how to the ultimate checklist for doing your first 100-unit deal. And if you want to invest with me passively, please Google Two Bridges Asset Management and fill out the form that you'll find on the website.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. If you go to the Facebook group, please tell him you came from One Rental at a Time so he knows his weekly time with us is worthwhile. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.